as well as some of the media systems within the classrooms with that $1 million. We also authorized 15 net new classified positions, and you can see there the detail of those 15 positions that have been hired. A lot of these have already been hired. Some of them are still under recruitment, but the idea is to try to get these on board as quickly as we can. Again, with supporting the Student Success Agenda, one of the concepts is to implement the Promise Pathways program. So we expanded the Promise Pathways program this year to both Paramount and Bellflower Unified School Districts. And we increased course offerings in English, math, and reading by 25 sections alone to help accommodate the additional students coming from these two unified school districts. We're expanding the Long Beach City College Promise, and as we know, we held the 85th Gala back in May, which raised about $50,000 towards the college scholarship funding. The next board goal is supporting the career technical education, workforce development, and economic development agendas. We have created an SBDC Specialty Technology Center with the LA Chamber of Commerce. We're becoming the regional center for the SBDC. And again, we received a truck driver training grant for about $220,000. We're in our third year of the Goldman Sachs 10,000 Small Business Initiative. Cohort 8 just completed in August of 2013. And the classes are going to begin this fall for cohorts 9 and 10. And then we are also organizing a local economic development summit in the fall of 2013, although that may be pushed into January, February timeframe. They're still working on that timing. So moving into the Budget Advisory Committee planning assumption highlights. The first overarching highlight is that there will be budget redirections and potential reductions in response to the state's budget impact and the priority that was identified by our College Planning Committee. And that priority was to improve rates of student success. So it's a very broad overarching priority, and everything that we're doing is geared towards that. Our FTES target is set at 20,400. We anticipate that we'll only be funded at a level of 19,858, which leaves 542 unfunded FTES, or about 2.6% unfunded. We have put into the budget a 1% deficit factor to offset some of the possible shortfalls from the apportionment revenues. We also have a total cost of ownership concept. This is a principle that will be deployed within the department planning and budgeting processes, and the concept is that if we are adding new buildings, we need to make sure that we're looking at the total cost of that new building. So is it going to increase the number of staffing needed to service the building? Is it going to increase the fire, life safety, and elevator maintenance contracts? Is it going to increase the amount of money that we need just for supplies to run that building? So that is what total cost of ownership is. So we're trying to build those principles into all of our budgeting as we're making decisions on what items to budget or not to budget. The Budget Advisory Committee recommended that we maintain a 5.5% unrestricted reserve for contingencies. However, in the budget that's presented to you tonight at the board's request, we reduced the unrestricted reserve contingency down to 5%, and we added a 0.5% reserve for student support services. So you will see that in the budget tonight. We have a load banking and vacation liability reserve of $2.7 million. And then we also, within the budget, there were benefit cost changes. So our health and welfare cost increased by 3.5%. Our PERS rate increased by 0.025%. Workers' compensation went up by 0.095%, and our state unemployment insurance actually decreased by 1.05%. So moving into the full-time equivalent students, the history and the projection. So you see here that back in 07-08, we were at our peak when we served 21,529 full-time equivalent students. And in the 11-12 fiscal year, that was the lowest that we've been over this 7-year history, where we were at the 19,694. And you can see that in every year, we typically serve more students than what the state pays us for. So those orange bars are the unfunded FTES, and the blue bars are what the state pays us for. So looking at the 12-13 fiscal year, we generated a total of 19,792 FTES. We anticipate that the state is going to fund us at 19,563. So we had 229 unfunded FTES, and that was what we used when we were closing our books for the 12-13 year. Moving into the budget for the 13-14 fiscal year, as I mentioned, we were targeting 20,400 total FTES, but we're anticipating that we will only be funded for 19,858 FTES, so we'll have about 542 unfunded FTES. Here is a list of all of the funds under the purview of the district. So as you know, we are required to keep track of the sources of revenue and the expenditures that flow from those revenues within the different funds. We have our unrestricted general fund. That's what we consider our operating budget, and that's typically what we focus on and discuss mostly. Our restricted general fund is used to account for all of our grants, our categorical programs, our parking services, and our health services. We have a capital projects fund that is used to account for any state capital outlay funds that we get from statewide bonds that helps contribute towards some of the construction activities. This is also where our scheduled maintenance funding comes into play, and our capital outlay fee that is charged to the non-residents goes into this capital projects fund. We have a child and adult development fund that is there that runs our 2 child development centers, one on each campus. Our contract and community education fund is there for the various contracts that we run, the contract education to the local businesses and the special things that we're asked to do. Our general obligation bond fund, this is where our Measure E 2008 funding is ran. We have a retiree benefits fund where we are setting aside the money towards our unfunded obligation for our retiree benefits fund, and we also pay out our the annual costs related to the health benefits for our retirees that we continue to pay for. The self-insurance fund is used for our property and liability insurance needs. Our student financial aid fund, this is where all of the federal grants like Pell, our SEOG, and our Stafford loans, as well as our CalWorks loans. This is all the direct aid that goes to our students is ran through the student financial aid fund. And then our Veteran Stadium Operations Fund is all the activity that runs through the Vet Stadium. So overall, our adopted budget for the 2013-14 fiscal year, we are projecting to spend $415.7 million in the various funds. So now we'll move to the expenditure reductions that were incurred for the 13-14 year. As you know, this number probably isn't new to the board or most of the people out in the audience. They've seen this before if you work at the district. We underwent $3.1 million in expenditure reductions for the 13-14 year. $2.2 million came from program discontinuance. $297,000 came from reorganizations, and then our hourly faculty accounts were reduced about $559,000. So moving into the details of the unrestricted general fund, What we're presenting here is the unaudited actual, so where we ended the fiscal year 2012-13, what the adopted budget is for 2013-14, and then the change, the increase or the decrease from the unaudited actual to the adopted budget. Overall, our revenues and other financing sources are increasing by about $5.2 million, and I'll go over the detail in a minute with that. The expenditures and other outgo, we are preparing a budget that those will increase as well by about $6 million. And then we are projecting a surplus or a deficit. So we ended the 12-13 year with a surplus of $2.3 million. Our adopted budget has a surplus of about $1.5 million. So our ending fund balance, we ended the fiscal year 2012-13 with just under $17.2 million. What we've built into the adopted budget, we're anticipating that the fund balance would be $18.7 million at the end of June 30th, 2014. So here's the revenue summary for the unrestricted general fund. You see that our federal revenue stays pretty constant within the unrestricted general fund. Most of our federal revenue you'll see within our restricted general fund or the student financial aid fund. There's not much that comes in unrestricted. Our apportionment revenue, this is the money that is generated from our full-time equivalent students. So in 12-13, we received $92.4 million in apportionment revenue. We've built into the budget that we're going to receive $97.5 million for an increase in apportionment revenue of $5 million. That increase is related to several factors. As I mentioned, $1.3 million has been built in for access or restoration. Another $1.5 million is related to COLA, the cost of living adjustment. And then there's $2.6 million related to a decrease in the deficit factor. So just to remind everybody again, the deficit factor occurs when either property taxes, enrollment fees, redevelopment agency property taxes, or the education protection account, the EPA funds, when any four of those don't come in at the level that the state projects within their budget, then community colleges get a deficit applied. So instead of the state making up the difference with state apportionment, they apply a deficit factor. So the state has said to community colleges, we're only going to fund you at the level that we build into the budget. And so since there's an inverse relationship between what we receive locally in property taxes and what we receive locally in enrollment fees, with the amount of money that the state provides us, if the state budget doesn't come in at the level, then they apply a deficit factor. To try to simplify that, let's just assume that we're supposed to receive $100 million. If we receive $5 million in enrollment fees and $5 million in property taxes, then the state is supposed to pay us $90 million. But if on a statewide level, our enrollment fees came in at $5 million, but the property taxes only came in at $3 million, so there's a $2 million shortfall. The state doesn't make it up and give us $87 million. They still only provide us with $85 million. So that would be about a 2% deficit factor that they would apply. In 12-13, the deficit factor that we have here in our unaudited actuals is at 3.7%. That's the highest that has been applied. And you may remember that in January, it was at 6.6%. In June, it was at 4.7%. And then on August 6th, it came down to 3.7%. So it's a constantly changing amount that the state gives us. We built into the budget only 1%. So the difference between that 3.7% that the state applied to the 12-13 year, and our budgeted 1% is providing us with an additional $2.6 million. Under the other state line item, we're projecting that to increase by about $545,000 over what we received in 12-13, and that's primarily related to our mandated cost revenue. And then they're moving to our local revenues. Not much of a change there, only about a $70,000 decrease from what we received in 12-13 to what we're budgeting in 13-14. And under our other sources, you see that we're projecting to receive about $302,000 less than what we received in the 12-13 year. So overall, our adopted budget has $104.7 million in total revenues that we're projecting. Here is what I just described to everyone. Okay, so moving into the expenditure summary, our expenditures are broken down by the classifications as required by the Budget and Accounting Manual. So we have our academic salaries. Here you see that we are projecting a decrease in our academic salaries, and so in 12-13 we spent about $42.2 million. In our adopted budget, we're projecting that we'll spend about $41.7 million for just under a $500,000 decrease. That is primarily related to the decrease in full-time faculty. We lost 36 full-time faculty from what we had last year, but that's offset by the number of adjunct that we added, both to backfill the 36 faculty and to increase the number of course sections. So that's a net change there with all the various academic salaries. Under the classified salaries, you see that we are projecting an increase of about $1.5 million. And as I mentioned earlier, we did add 15 additional net new classified positions, and so that's the majority of what that increase in the salaries of classified salaries is. Under our benefits, the benefits aren't projected to change too much, only about $61,000. And again, benefits are a function of the salaries. So when our salaries are increasing, we expect our benefits to increase. And they didn't increase as much, primarily because we had an increase in our part-time faculty, which don't receive health and welfare benefits, and so the benefit rates don't increase by a corresponding percentage there. Under our supplies, we are projecting about $98,000 more for supplies, and this is both increase in some instructional supplies as well as some of our custodial supplies for the new buildings that have come online. Our services area, you see that this area is where one of the larger increases in cost is. It's about $3.1 million. More than half of that, $1.7 million, is related to election expenses, and then there is an increase in the budget for the utilities due to the new budgets that are coming online in the 2013-14 fiscal year. New buildings, I think I said budget, sorry. Under the capital outlay line item, you see there that we are projecting that we're going to spend about $1.4 million than what we spent last year. $1 million of this was the augmentation for the technology master plan, and then there was another $83,000 that is the district match for the instructional equipment grant that we received for the state. So that's the majority of what that increase is related to. And then under our other outgo line item, we're projecting to spend about $447,000 more than we had spent in the previous fiscal year. $249,000 of that is the scheduled maintenance match. We had a $100,000 increase in our property and liability costs, and then a $75,000 increase in the match that is needed to run the Child Development Center. So that's primarily what that is. So overall, within the adopted budget, of the unrestricted general fund, we're planning to spend $103.3 million, which is a $6 million increase over the prior year. Here is put into words what I just mentioned for each of those line items. This chart here is just a pie chart of the breakdown of the classifications of the expenditures. So you see that overall, our salaries and benefits represent 84.8% of the total unrestricted general fund budget. So moving into a breakdown of our reserves, we have both unassigned reserves and assigned reserves. Our unassigned reserves, there's two categories of those. The first one being the board mandated reserve of 5%. So that's the $5,163,000. And then we have economic uncertainties of $6,830,000. And we have some assigned reserves, the student support services. This is that 0.5% that the board requested that we designate for student support services. So that's $516,000. We have set aside $3.4 million for 30 new full-time faculty that we're going to need to hire in the 14-15 fiscal year. We have some carryover money for our technology master plan of about $85,000. And then our vacation and load banking reserve is about $2.7 million. So a total of $18,675,000 in reserves at June 30, 2014. This slide is showing a 7-year trend and summary of our salaries and benefits as a percentage of total expenses. It also shows the surplus or deficit, the ending balance, and then the ending balance as a percentage of total expenses and other outgo. So you can see here that in 3 of the last 7 years, we operated at a deficit, and then we have now, both in 12-13 and 13-14, we are showing a surplus on there, and our on that top line there, the salary and benefit as a percentage of total expenses and other outgo, that number has fluctuated somewhat each year depending upon where we are with the salaries and benefits. And as I said, in 13-14, it's down to 84.8%. So moving into the 2-year projection, what this slide is depicting, it's taking the and showing a breakdown of the adopted budget for 2013 and then doing a projection of what 2014-15 would look like if pretty much everything remained the same. So the first line item there, the beginning fund balance, that was where we ended the year, June 30th, 2013. So we're starting July 1, 2013 with $17,180,000. We had a surplus of $2.4 million, and again, apportionment changes of just over $5 million, with some other revenue changes of about $177,000. We put into the 13-14 budget new faculty. And so remember I said that we have 17 new faculty built into the budget for 13-14, and then in 14-15 we're going to need to hire 30 new full-time faculty. There were some other salary and benefit changes that occurred during the 13-14 year, and then some other expenditure changes of about $5 million, so that the budget that we're presenting to you with everything that I just explained has a surplus of just under $1.5 million, or an ending fund balance of the $18,675,000. So if you take that $18,675,000, move that into 14-15. So if we assume that the budget would just roll over from what we have this year, we would have a surplus in 14-15 of the $1,493,000. So you can see that the next to the last line on the adopted budget is the $1,493,000. that figure goes up to the second line under the projected column, is where that number flows from. Now, we do know that some things are going to change in 14-15, but right now we're assuming that there would be no changes in revenue. So that means that the governor in the 14-15 budget wouldn't provide any access or restoration funding or any COLA funding or anything. So that's why you see zeros there under the apportionment changes. Now, we know we have to hire 30 new full-time faculty, and so the net cost after backing out the decrease in the adjunct is about $2.5 million. So that would be an increase to our expenditures in 14-15. We also have other salary and benefit changes that we're projecting of $1,772,000. This really represents step and column changes, increases to health and welfare benefits, those types of things.